Welcome everyone. This is the third lecture on Bergson and Kant. I'm presenting a reading of Bergson's Time and Free Will. I have now previously covered mostly his notion of durée and or duration, and I've spoken about language and also the sort of inherent Cratylonian dangers that are lurking really in Bergsonianism. And I will now continue on freedom and the self and how Bergson misappropriates Kant's transcendental freedom, how he misrepresents freedom in Kant and does not understand it, which will give rise to, will provide a ground, ironically speaking, for the post-structuralists and postmodernists, of course, who also cannot really think and articulate freedom, just like Bergson, and hence only can quibble about the abyss and other such poetic notions, where they should instead see human transcendental freedom at work. So, if this is the first you're hearing, there are two more lectures on Bergson and Kant on my channel. I will link to them in the description of this video. And now I'm recording this in 2024. This year also sees Immanuel Kant's 300th birthday on the 22nd of April, to be precise. He would have been 300 years old. And if you'd like to read Kant with me, the Critique of Pure Reason is what we will focus on, then just follow the link in the description of this video and you'll learn more about my course on Kant. So here we continue now. On freedom and the self. There are two different selves for Henri Bergson. The fundamental self and the social self. The living concrete self gets covered over with an outer crust of clean-cut psychic states which are separated and consequently fixed. So this is a quote from Bergson. Yeah? This outer self is but a, quote, spatial and social representation. Now, sort of a projectionism of the self. It's quite a striking narcissistic understanding of subjectivity by Bergson here. Only by deep introspection we realize that, quote, our inner states are living things constantly becoming, free and immeasurable. In a first instance, freedom thus seems to be acceptance of one's ever-changing, deeper level affects. So again, freedom to Bergson is affective. It's got to do with accepting that our inner states are ever-changing, which also has to do with, as I mentioned previously, his rather Cratylonian understanding of language. And so freedom here is, first of all, it seems accepting that we are on a deep level affected. But our unfreedom originates when we project, quote, the shadow of the self into homogeneous space, end of quote, and conflate this shadow or this projection with the fundamental self. Now, this is quite striking because, again, the fundamental self is but, it seems, quite Humean. A heap, a bundle of not impressions, but a bundle of affectations. In society, we are but functioning automata, repetitive, caught in a homogeneous time and space, or rather, I would say maybe homogenized time and space. Not, however, we don't find ourselves in our personal immediacy. And this is what Bergson wants to get to. So you see, it's this, you can hear almost the pre-echo of the language of oppression, right? What's being repressed or oppressed are your genuine desires down there, your affectations, and that's who you really are. It's quite a striking insinuation. And I remember giving a talk on Bergson a few years ago, and was just as critical as I am of him now, and the audience did not approve of my disapproval. But you can see how what can be sneaked in here is, oh, what you really are is your repressed desires. You see, your immediate, your personality that's down there, hiding away, and you're just projecting a false shadow to the outside world. So what you really need is primordial screaming therapy. Well, so obviously Bergson does not claim that, but you can see where this will go then in the rest of the 20th century. If duration is perceived to be homogeneous, then, quote, the same states could occur over and over again, causality would imply necessary determination, and all freedom would become incomprehensible. Such indeed is the result to which the critique of pure reason leads. Now, that is such a crude misreading and misappropriation of Kant that one wonders why Bergson was ever taken seriously. What he's doing is so inflammatory and nefarious and frankly just an outright lie that either he did not understand Kant or he did understand him and was worried about what Kantian freedom might imply. So here what Bergson does is, I'll say this again, so if we misunderstand time, he claims, then causality would imply necessary determination. All freedom would become incomprehensible because, again, your freedom means your deeper affective states, your desires. That's really all you are. And this is what the critique of pure reason apparently suppresses. Now, this is someone, Bergson, has not understood at all transcendental freedom whatsoever. Or perhaps he has, and he's worried about it, it seems. Due to a system of inadequate education, one focusing on memory, not judgment, and here's a quote again from Bergson, a violent anger erupting for some circumstance can trigger in the self an hereditary vice suddenly emerging from obscure depths. Now, this is quite striking. An hereditary vice. And what does he mean by that? What does he mean by an hereditary vice might suddenly emerge from obscure depths? So it seems that Bergson is worried about hereditary vices that are floating around in obscure depths. However, on the other hand, you are nothing but your suppressed desires. Now, to rid the education of memory would mean that we no longer read Homer, or Plato, or Aristotle, or Aquinas, or in fact, anyone or anything of our ancestry. Instead, it is only cold judgment that would prevail. A sort of scientistic world he seems to propose here now, or else hereditary vices might break out. Striking that this call to rid the world of memory. Many will live such a life for all they know of themselves and their past, is their past symbolic states which they have memorized, internalized, yet do not know proper judgment of their fundamental self and its multiple interpenetrating affective states. So really what you are is not cultural collective memory, which you are a part of, right? No, you're supposed to be, according to Bergson, the judgments you form of your various, based on your various affective states that are just entirely individualistic, supposedly. That, of course, such affective states can be controlled and manipulated. I think to anyone who's halfway thinking that should be obvious. That Bergson either did not see this or, again, was arguing for it. Maybe to those who listen, it might be a good idea to read Edward Bernays. The subject cannot handle the immediacy of the true self when it strikes, and when it cannot be withheld by the superficial social self. I also always wonder, frankly, how anyone can make any connection between Bergson and Heidegger. I find it just completely impossible to see any relationship between their works. There's nothing there. And if it's purely the association that both of them speak about time, then I don't think you've quite understood how to read a philosophical text, to be honest. The fundamental self of the many suffers from, quote, a parasitic self, which continually encroaches upon the other. Many live this kind of life and die without having known true freedom. It's almost silly, right? This call to a sort of pseudo-heroism by Bergson here. Die without having known true freedom. Now, what is true freedom? Again, for him, very much is making judgments based on affective states. Those who are never truly free, according to Bergson, are those who never free themselves from their immaturity inflicted upon them by a society caught in time. Society is constructed so that, quote, we shall believe that we are acting freely, even though for the most part we are automata, not following our own affectations. That's important. My very own affectations make me who I am. And freedom is only ever fully attained when one acts without known or any reason at all, in a great and solemn crisis, in defiance of what is conventionally called a motive. Now, again, rather striking that you would have to bring in this psychological notion of a motive from the outside, and that you do not understand, Bergson, what transcendental freedom genuinely is, which is the self-positing self, the self that can begin a new causal chain. It is, quote, this absence of any tangible reason that defines how deep our freedom goes, end of quote from Bergson. Freedom thus lies, according to Bergson, in the act of the subject, or rather in the reaction, I would say, of the subject, capable of letting its fundamental self flow freely with the immediacy of impressions and its own affective states. Freedom is in this sense self-expression, and most strongly present in the artist. Now here we have it, don't we? This is Bergson, page 172. Now, the artist and the call to self-expression in art, as if art were only about self-expression, which helped bring forth so much hideous non-art in the 20th century. And Bergson is almost writing here the script for the 1968 revolution. I have to say, it's quite remarkable. Quote, freedom is the relation of the concrete self to the act which it performs. This relation is indefinable just because we are free. And analyzing that process would symbolize it. The self is, quote, infallible when it affirms its immediate experiences. Now, I do wonder, though, how can a self have any immediate experiences and be able to distinguish itself from its experiences? Now, it's usually the case, speaking of memory, in the Occidental European tradition, that what is an immediate experience is actually an impediment to freedom. So and also this call to infallibleness, to be infallible. So whatever to put this simply to anyone who's listening, if you just really merely react to any impulse, that's when you're free, according to Bergson. So does giving in to the flux make the self morally infallible? Also, if the affective states are what the fundamental self is then the freedom here proclaimed as lying in the action, not rather reaction? Freedom then as a reaction to immediate affectations, deep-seated emotions of some unknowable self uncoupled from reason. One ought, above all, not to live for the external world, but only for oneself. But not just for oneself, but in a sense for one's immediate affectations that one has. And that's who you are. And here then that's, according to Bergson, when we are free. That would mean that would mean, first of all, that ethical life is completely impossible. Ethical communal life is utterly impossible in what Bergson here proposes. Bergson proposes reacting to an unknowable self's immediate affectations. There's no ethos here. There's no community. There cannot be a polis. This would mean a breakdown of ethical life, what Bergson here proposes. Overall, quote again from good old Bergson, to act freely is to recover possession of oneself, and to get back into pure duration. Kant's great mistake was to take time as a homogeneous medium. Now, duration is itself homogeneous and is itself a medium. Yeah, Bergson is playing a very clever game here with words, and there are first of all, Kant's first critique is not on you as a person. That's the first thing anyone has to realize. Kant's critique of pure reason does not describe experience in the life world. Kant's critique of pure reason describes the human being as a Verstandeswesen, as a being of the understanding. That's to say, in terms of how we make scientific judgment and form scientific cognition and knowledge. That's what's at stake in the critique of pure reason, not experience of you and yourself and your feelings and who you really are, etc., etc. So this is the fundamental error that Bergson makes, and which already should disqualify Bergson from any further serious discussion that does not point out the many, many mistakes that Bergson makes when it comes to his assessment of Kant. And again, Time and Free Will is a book entirely based on a criticism of Kant that is going, as you can see, absolutely nowhere. Now, here's something else though. Pure duration, spatial time, is ultimately nothing but, again, a homogeneous medium. In fact, it's the homogeneous medium, to spin this a bit further, in which every self that is just purely affective, reacting to its affectations, gets to play itself out, gets to react on its affective states, and it is a quasi-homogeneous medium, because all that the self now is, aside from all the complete misunderstanding of Kant, all that the self now is exactly this. So it must be a homogeneous medium, or else, again, one could not have any description of this self, and also no claim to it. If we get to this self that through the way in which Bergson argues, then we must, however, presuppose a homogeneous medium in which this self appears. And that's duration. So next time, what I will do is I will go over freedom in the true Kantian sense, and will, for that reason, turn to the first critique, but also to Kant's religion within the boundaries of mere reason, so to theoretical or pure reason, but also practical reason. So again, thank you very much for listening. I'd be ever so grateful if you could support the work here on this channel, become a patron of the arts and philosophia, and perhaps also enroll in one of my courses to support the work here on this channel. Thank you very much indeed.